Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of the UK's youngest serial killer. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! Hi, how are you all? I hope you are well. I'm feeling spicy and energised even though I am really tired. It's a weird combination. Let's see when I collapse. Today's story takes us to Essex. Essex, innit? Oh my god, it's Essex. In the early hours of the 29th of March 2014, 33-year-old James Atfield would be walking home. He was a father of 5 and sadly, only 4 years before this, he had suffered a car accident, and this had left him with a really serious brain injury that he, over the last 4 years, had been recovering from. So lots of physio, lots of support to get himself back on track, and he was living in semi-assisted living. So it was quite the injury. He was really poorly. On this particular Friday night in March, he had gone out on the piss, have a few drinkies, and hence why he was walking home, and he was walking through Castle Park. During his wander through Castle Park, he fancied himself a nap. He was really drunk, and he just lay himself down on the grass in the park. A member of the public walked past James when he was sort of on the floor, and they asked him if he was okay, and they suggested that it might not be the best idea that he is having a sleep in the park and that he should take himself home, but he was quite far gone. Sadly, later on that morning at 5:45 a.m, a different member of the public would stumble across James Atfield, and he was not in a good way, and I'm not talking drunk. He had suffered over 100 stab wounds to his body, one of which was to his eyeballs, nails and eyeballs. No. So not a pretty sight to come across whatsoever. He was still alive. Over 100 stab, he was still alive. But sadly, by the time paramedics arrived at the scene, they couldn't save his life. The autopsy told a gruesome story. Most of these knife wounds, these stab wounds, were superficial. So they were enough to really hurt, but not enough to kill. So it suggested that whoever murdered James had taken great pleasure in seeing him in pain. James had stab wounds to his head, eye, neck, chest and stomach, and there were also a lot of defensive wounds on his arms and hands, so he was with it enough, even though he was drunk, to put up a fight to defend himself. The time of the attack was unknown, but they thought sort of anywhere between 1 and 5. Horrifyingly, 3 months later, another murder would take place. Again in Colchester, Essex. Did I say Colchester the first time round? The Colchester in Essex. Essex. Gotta love a stereotype. So we're now at the 17th of June 2014. 31-year-old Nahid Almanea was on her way to university. She had only been in the UK for 6 weeks. What a welcome. She was a student from Saudi Arabia, and she had come over here to study at the University of Essex. And her brother lives here, so she stayed with him, and that's where she was walking from his place to uni. This was at 10:30 in the morning, in the AM to PM. Somebody hit the lights. Excuse me. So yeah, literally broad daylight, 10:30 a.m, walking to university along a nature trail, not a secluded tiny little twitten somewhere, a nature trail that lots of other people walk on. People walk their dogs, you get the picture. So this was not a secluded area. Nobody would expect what happened next. A killer was hiding in the bushes and he ambushed and attacked Nahid. She was attacked from behind. She had 16 stab wounds, so much less than James, but again, most of them were superficial. She had a stab wound in her lower back which ruptured her liver. She had a fractured skull, and that was likely from falling to the ground when she was attacked. She also had a stab wound to above her left breast, which broke the rib beneath. And she had been stabbed through both of her eyes. I can't even. A poor man that was out looking for his cat, he'd lost his cat. Oh my God, I find it terrible. It must be awful just finding anybody, literally, you know what I mean, any dead body, Sophie. But this was just very, very gruesome, and really traumatic for this guy. And he said that her face was just such a mess, and that one of the eyes was like out of the socket, and the other one was like there was just a lot of blood and congealed blood. Just yuck. That shit has got to haunt your dreams. That really has. I feel so much for the people that find these people. The police at this point, their initial thought is that they are looking for a serial killer, and this is frightening. 2 victims, both have been stabbed to death, lots of superficial wounds, and the eye thing. So they focus on locals in the area. That is what a local is, Sophie. And they are looking for people with knife crime history. And 70 names came up. One of these names was a 15-year-old boy, and he was called James Fairweather. What a pleasant surname. Now, the reason his name came up is that he had recently been arrested and gone to court for an armed robbery, basically. He took a knife into like a shop and just randomly he stole a packet of cigars at knife point. So it was the fact that he'd used the knife and probably could have just walked out with them. What a div. But anyhow, so that is why he was on their list. However, he was interviewed and he alibied himself, kind of a loose alibi though, because he said he was home alone at the time of the murders. And the police were not concerned with him, really, because he was 15 years old. And yeah, his crime seemed like a kid that had just made a mistake. You know, I mean, taking a knife, that's a big mistake. But yeah, they weren't overly concerned with him as a suspect. But guess what? They should not have underestimated the boy. James Fairweather had a very normal upbringing, and I am genuine, he did. There was no secret stuff going on. There wasn't abuse. There wasn't an alcoholic parent. It was very normal, and that scares the shit out of me. People said he was a very lovely child, like a young child, very nice, very lovely, nothing going on. And I always feel like this is never really given much attention, and it makes me so cross because, hello. But when he then got older and he went to Colchester Academy, he started to struggle, and he was bullied a lot. He had dyslexia, but I don't particularly think that's why he was bullied. He would later on be diagnosed with autism. However, that was undiagnosed when he was at secondary school, and he didn't fit in. Undiagnosed autism, especially in young people, also in adults, it's really common for adults when they do get diagnosed to feel like an utter sense of relief because they then understand themselves. They're like, oh, that all makes sense. So when things like that go undiagnosed, it can cause a lot of emotional distress for the teenager, the young person. They struggle to understand why they are different, why they aren't fitting in, and there is no support around them to help them to navigate that and to help them to, I don't know, not fit in, because that's not what it's about, but help them to understand themselves. And a lot of people say that it's incredibly isolating. James's autism was not diagnosed until after he was arrested. Spoiler alert, he was arrested. And the specialists, a few of them, were utterly gobsmacked that he hadn't been diagnosed previously. Apparently it was just, they could not believe it. And again, we have this same situation where people that are suffering in some way with their mental health seem to be, and it can be so dangerous, really dangerous. How many times in how many cases do we hear this happen, where like they're even known to like social services or what have you for dark thoughts and all of the rest of it, and it's just until they do something, it's just kind of crazy to me. And apparently, from what these specialists say, they were really shocked that James wasn't diagnosed and he wasn't getting any support. So come on, like that thing, like stop things before they happen. What's it called? There's a saying, prevention's better than a cure. Hello? Yeah? Can we stop it at the source? Support these people with bad mental health, or is that how you say it? You know what I mean? Or undiagnosed conditions that could lead to depression, anxiety. Yeah, it just seems backwards. James also had, unfortunately, large ears, and that did not help. He was also picked on because of this as well. James was incredibly close to his grandma, and the stressor in his life, what's that from? Criminal Minds, stressor, was likely the death of his grandmother. And again, undiagnosed autism, no support with that, would have made it really difficult for James to express his emotions and his feelings. I am not excusing what he does, but there's always a story behind it, isn't there? There is always a story. At this time, when his grandmother has passed away, James develops an unhealthy obsession with serial killers, of all things. His favourite being Ted Bundy, and that is interesting because Ted Bundy was charismatic and charming. Weird, because he was vile, but, he was. And this is the person that James idolises, and James, being autistic, struggles with communication. So it's almost like he looked up to him because he was very charismatic and he had no problem communicating, did he? Old Bundy. He had all the social skills. James was arrested in 2013 for criminal damage, and then he was arrested in 2014 for the knife point robbery of a pack of cigars. At this point, he was given a 1-year supervision order, and despite all of this, despite his decline in mental health and behaviour, nobody noticed that he might need some support, so he just carried on his merry way. Back to the police investigation. Just to interject here, I'm going to digress. The fan is possibly like the best thing I ever bought. I love it so much. Happiness. So, 6 months have passed. The police were going hard because they were desperate to, find whoever this killer is. They drained 3 rivers. Crikey, 3 rivers to try and find like a murder weapon. And this is the council, the council of Colchester, or is it Colchester Council? I don't know. One of those. They were instructed, and they put loads of money into this. It cost lots of money, the whole thing, to like cut back all. Because these attacks had happened in places where it was likely, that the killer was hiding away, like hiding in a bush, they cut down all of the what's it called, bushes and foliage and stuff. They cut it all back. They just made it bare. No hide and seek here, please. And then on the 27th of May 2015, a dog walker called Michelle Sadler phones the police. Hello? She has seen a young man acting suspiciously. Not to mention, he was hanging around at the site where a year before Naheed had been murdered. So, all the locals, they know this information. On edge. This young man is standing on like a small footbridge, and just being odd and weird. She don't like it. So she turns around. I'm so glad she did that. So she got her spidey sense was going, no, turned around and just went back the way she came. She's like, I don't want to walk past this kid. And then she meets someone that she knows. I think another dog walker, and they just, they're familiar with each other. So they decide that they're together now, and the other lady's got a big old dog. That's handy. So, safety in numbers. So they decide to walk along and just see what's what. When they get to that area, he's not on the footbridge anymore, but he's like near a tree. He's loitering. I think that's the word we'll use. Loitering. Weird. Also, there had been, at the time of the two murders, I guess people have given witness statements about anybody that might have possibly been in the area at the time of the killings, and somebody had described a man and his attire, and there'd been like a sort of sketch made up, and they described this man and what he was wearing, this young man, and this young kid is wearing this jacket that had been described. The police do not hang about, they are there, quick as flash, and lo and behold, who is this young man? He is none other than James Fairweather. He's wearing gloves, same coat as the description of the previous, the killer, and he has a freaking knife. So he is swiftly arrested. However, the police at this point don't really realise what's about to happen, and they don't realise who they've got in custody because, he's young. Like, his age really was a stumbling block for the police. So he's young, 15. Yeah, he's got a knife. Yeah, he's wearing gloves. I think the dog just barked. I'm scared. Are you warning me of something? Is the shed about to fall down? What? They kind of think, yeah, it's a bit odd, a bit weird. We'll take him in. He's got a knife. After all, slept too far. But when they get to the station, James Fairweather does not shut his trap. He does what these serial killers do, and he just gobs on, just says everything. Whoa, they must have been like, whoa, hold the bus, where's my pen? He confessed to the two previous murders, just confessed. He also confessed that he was about to kill again. He literally was there waiting for his next victim. I bet Michelle Sadler is so freaking glad that she turned around. His house was searched and his room was full of serial killer books and films and all sorts of stuff like chocker. He had kept newspaper clippings of the murders that he had committed, 101. And his laptop showed extensive searches of serial killers and violent pornography. His interviews are literally something else. You can see them, or some of them, bits of them on YouTube. And at one point he's like, can I stand up? Like, he's talking about the murders and James's murder in particular, and he's like, can I stand up and show you? And then he just stands up and reenacts the stabbing. How horrible. And there are some horrible details, actually. He said that he heard voices in his head and that these voices were humiliating him and goading him on and just not very nice to him. He said he really always tried to resist the voices, but whenever he did anything bad, they would congratulate him, well done, praise him. He said even the 2014 robbery at knife point was their idea, and that the voices had begun then. He said that they made him do it. The voices made me do it. That old number. He would give a lot of detail about the crimes and lots of things that weren't ever released to the public, and he described James's murder in detail, and he crept out of his house and he went out, itchy nose, of the living room window because he knew that if he opened the front door that his parents would hear. So he was, planning on sneaking out. He took a knife and he wore gloves. He knew what he was doing. This was only 3 days after he was in court for the knife point robbery. So did absolutely fuck all to deter him, didn't it? He stumbled across James in the park, which was about a mile away from his home, and he said that he heard these voices and that they told him that James was to be his victim. The voices said that if he didn't kill James, that he would be sacrificed himself. He said that he stabbed James 4 or 5 times in the stomach first, and then several times in his head. I'm going to just put a timestamp on because the next bit is grim and it made me feel a bit sick. So if you're a bit squeamish or you're eating or something, don't listen, okay? Ready now? One of the wounds that was meant to go into the side of James's head, he missed, or James moved, and it went in his eye. So I think the first eye injury, stab wound, was by accident from kind of what he said. It wasn't something he planned to do, but it happened. And he said, and this just made, I did cry, to be fair, I did actually cry when I read this. He said that James, he let out just the most horrific scream like he'd never heard before. He said it was really loud and really strange, like one of those screams that goes right through you. I don't know, something about the description just made it feel just too real to me, and I was like, that is god awful. Okay. There were 3 or 4 stab wounds behind the ear, and James said that he saw a light in the distance and he heard James gurgling, and he assumed that James was literally dying at that point, so he ran off. He washed his knife off in a stream and then threw it, and when he got home, he put all of his clothes in like a black bin bag and left it out with the rubbish to get taken away, which it did. I'm not sure how, I didn't find the information, but I know that he was home at 2:30 in the morning, so there must have been a way that the police knew that, which means that James Atfield was laying in that park dying for nearly 4 hours. That's just something else. What a tragic life for James Atfield. That awful accident and then years of rehabilitation trying to get himself strong, and then that is how he dies. James will go on to talk about Nahid's murder, and he said that this time he took a large bayonet knife, so different weapon. He wore gloves again, and yeah, again, he knew what he was there to do. He knew as soon as he saw her that she was going to be his next victim. He crept up behind her, he ambushed her, and he stabbed her through the back. I think I read that he said the knife was so big it went all the way through, so it must have been a huge, a big old knife. He then stabbed her in both of her eyes, and she fell to the ground, and that's when she fractured her skull. He said he stabbed her in both of her eyes so that she could see no evil. She certainly would have been frickin' looking at it. He said that he killed her instantly with the second stab wound to her eye because it went into her brain. Small comfort that she didn't lay there in agony like James did before. Fairweather went on to retract all of his confession. He said that the voices in his head made him confess to murders that he didn't commit, but with all of the information about the murders that nobody would have known apart from the murderer. But he said they told him that information. They told him what had happened. Right. Sadly for James, DNA linked him to both of the murders. Cut and dry. In court, he denied murder, but he pleaded guilty to manslaughter with diminished responsibility, saying that he was crazy, basically. He said he was suffering from psychosis at the time of the murders, so the voices in his head and stuff like that. The prosecution said that no, James was making up his voices. However, there were a number of psychiatrists that worked with James, and they, for the defence, granted, but there was 3 or 4, and some of them said he was the worst case they had ever seen, like the most depraved thoughts. So they all really believed that he was suffering with psychosis and that this was what was going on. All of the professionals on the prosecution and the defence, they all agreed that James was autistic, so that's when he got his diagnosis. However, and I'm so glad for this, the judge refused to link a diagnosis of autism with the case and with what James had done. Well done, that man. He said it was disrespectful to all autistic people, which it frickin' is. You can't start saying that, oh, he murdered people because he was autistic. What? No thanks. Like, okay, get off the bus. In fact, autistic people are more likely to be the victim of crime rather than the perpetrator. So he threw that out of the court. On the 22nd of April 2016, James Fairweather was found guilty of both murders, and this then gave him the title of the UK's youngest serial killer. I think in the UK, if you've killed 2 people, you are a serial killer on separate occasions, and I think in the US it's 3 or more. So there's a bit of, like, you know, it's a little bit different, and he was about to kill a 3rd anyway, so yeah. He was a serial killer, wasn't he? He was sentenced to life with a minimum of 27 years. And his response to that was, I don't give a shit. Despite not giving a shit, James appealed his conviction later on that year and failed because of his mental state and the crime that he committed. Oh, what a case. So many bits in that where you're like, oh, so many pieces of that story that are just really tragic on just so many different levels. Yeah. Whoa. Heavy. Safe. Heavy. I keep fiddling with this. It's terrible. I'm such a fiddler. I shouldn't have things that I can mess about with. Ooh, what's the flavour? Nairobi Camellia. Ooh, nice. Good old Body Shop. Good old Body Shop. Do you want to see it? I'll try and do that thing that people do. Can you say, wait, can you? How's that? It's beautiful. Hope you've all had a lovely week. It's not been too horrifically hot here, so I'm not that stroppy about it all. But it's sports day tomorrow. Guarantee, full sun, no shade. Unhappy me. I'm going to take an ice pack in a pocket or something. Right, you're right. Yeah, I'm fine. Can't be caring about what I look like. It's all about the comfort. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. I'm down for that this week. I'm really in the mood for a chit chat. What should we talk about? Ooh, I'm going to film my question video. I keep threatening. Jesus, Sophie. I know I do, but just it's been so busy. But I'm looking forward to that, really am, because I've got loads of good questions and I can't wait to... It'd be nice to come and do a little chit chat with you, actually. Like I said, I'm doing it as an extra video, so anyone that's like, who cares? Don't worry, just watch True Crime on Friday. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to try and get that in my diary, actually, so it's like I've got a date. Anyway, waffle. Stop it. Haven't eaten yet, need to go and have my tea. Okay, I love you. Can't wait to have a chat with you, and I will see you all next week. Love you loads. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Sin and Tonic. I do hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a vessel of your choosing of gin, or tea, or water, or vodka, or beer, whatever you want. As long as you're here and we can chat. I love you. Okay, I'll see you next week. Oh, what's this? Okay, bye.